Hello, hello, hello.
How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. I am good. Yes.
Welcome everyone to another Askable Adults show, the show that we talk all about sex ed, community, and HIV prevention. Today we have a very interesting show. We're gonna be talking with one of our co-workers and a person that has been dedicating part of her life to work with people living with HIV. And this is because tomorrow is World AIDS Day, so we are going to be talking about it in tonight. But before actually starting, as usual, or acknowledgments and recognitions, and that is that Black Lives Matter today and always. And with that, we wanted to actually give a shout out to Dr. David Melbranch, who is an internal medicine physician, researcher, and public health advocate who specializes in HIV and AIDS prevention and treatment. He's based in Philadelphia, but he doesn't only advocates to end HIV stigma, but he also speaks about the importance of men taking care of their mental health. Dr. Mel Branch has written several articles about race, sexual health, informative videos about HIV and AIDS, stigma, and even has a book named Standing on His Shoulders: What I Learned About Race, Life, and High Expectations from My Haitian Superman Father. So, shout out to Dr. David Melbranch today.
Thanks for that,
And
Jonathan.
Yee. And who are these people that are talking to
Who
you? Do
are
you
these
want to start?
people? My name is Nadine, and my pronouns are they and their. I am the community liaison for Berks Teens Matter. And with me is the
My,
one and the only.
my name is Jonathan Rodriguez. I use he, him, and el pronouns, and I'm the Youth and Health Resource Center coordinator for Bergstein's Matters. And like we said, tonight we're going to be talking about World AIDS Day, a day that many people worldwide used to create awareness and remember those who died due an AIDS related illness. No one died from AIDS or HIV. Um, and today like I mentioned, we have a very special guest who has worked for many years with the sector of people of the community of people living with HIV. And who has to continue with to live not only with the virus but also with the stigma associated with the AIDS epidemic. Joining us from our own backbone organization, Co County Wellness Services, give it up to the AIDS certificate registered nurse and director of care services at Co County, Michelle Jones.
Yeah,
Hi.
that was a mouthful, Jonathan, but you did it.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was very kind of you. Very nice introduction.
He's only saying what is. So, I mean, it was well said. I have to say that, but he's only acknowledging who you are in your professional capacity here and all that you bring to what you do.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
So, Michelle, first of all, how are you?
I'm good. It's to be expected, no complaints.
That's nice to
Great.
hear.
So first of all, Michelle, how long have you been here at Cook County?
Yeah, it was 20 years in October, this past October.
Wow.
Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
2 decades. Long time.
So you've been here for 20 years, but Nadine, do you want to tell us a little bit about Cook County?
A little bit about Cook County. Well, for folks at home who may not know, Cook County has been around since the mid 1980s, offering care services for people living with HIV, and for a good part of that time, also prevention education. Many folks saw many people come through these doors and pass on, sometimes very quickly. But all these years later, it's also true that some of our earliest clients are still around with us. And Michelle, I know that before you became an HIV case manager, which is what you first did when you came to Cook County Wellness Services, I happen to know that prior to coming here, you worked as a nurse.
Yes, I did.
But I don't remember where you did that work. So could you tell us a little bit about your background, and in particular, if you've had if you had any experience as a nurse working with people who were living with HIV, or any exposure to HIV and AIDS prior to starting at Cook County Wellness Services 20 years ago?
Yes, I did. I actually worked on a busy hospital med-surg floor, what used to be St. Joe's in the city of Reading, up on 12th Street. And we actually had an awful lot back in the early 90s of people dying with AIDS pretty steadily and regularly on the hospital floor. So yes, it wasn't case management experience. It was actually acute care for dying patients with the disease, not just HIV, but there were many patients that we cared for on that floor that were dying of HIV and AIDS. Should say of
So
AIDS,
it's really
HIV.
possible. It's possible that we crossed paths and didn't even know each other back
Yeah,
then.
maybe.
And since you started here at Cook County and until today, have you seen what has changed since you started here at Cook County?
Well, it has evolved. HIV has evolved into a much more manageable disease. Um, it's no longer the death sentence that it used to be. Actually, it started evolving out of that in the mid 90s, a little later than I was at first a hospital nurse. But it's just seen a great evolution in manageability. Not that we should take it lightly by any means, because I think that because it's become managed, it can breed a little bit of complacency in regard to just not being as scared of the communication of the disease. Oh, it's not that much of a big deal, but it is still a big deal because there's lifelong treatment considerations, and if you don't have to be on medications, you shouldn't be. So
Yeah, that's something that I always try to tell people. Um, not not because we are not having as many cases as, for example, in the 80s and in the 90s of people dying from an AIDS related illness, doesn't mean that it's still not serious. Yes,
right.
there's been many advances in medication, but either either people that may be at risk will need to protect themselves, or people who are living with HIV will have to be in treatment, because if not, it can get to the point of AIDS, which is just the later stage or the diagnosis for HIV. But I think that we're living in a very weird moment, because there's still stigma, but and it's not that people don't take it seriously, but it's just like, oh, I can just take medication and I will live completely normal. But I tend to think about it as, for example, people with diabetes. Well, if you have chronic diabetes, you may need to get insulin, etc. You need to check what you're eating, and normally you will have to take care of your diet, etc. But now you have this other thing in your life that if you don't take care of it, it can hurt your lifestyle, or your life,
Quality of your life.
your quality of life.
Mhm.
So just because there has been advances, it doesn't mean that it's not serious.
Right.
Um, And we've seen that, especially now during the COVID pandemic. We'll be here all night, but
Michelle, putting your experiences into context. So, in the early 90s as an acute care nurse, in the early 2000s as a case manager, and today as a case manager, how were the needs of the community, the needs of the people that you were serving, how did they differ in those phases, do you think?
Well, the biggest thing that comes to mind is the fact that people were on these huge cocktails of treatment, and now those treatments are much more simplified. And so there was a lot of medical management around just taking the medications to stay alive. And now there's so many considerations as everything as so many things have evolved in the HIV drug pipeline, like as far as different ways that different tools in the so-called prevention toolbox. And we didn't have any of those things back then. So there's been a lot of strides made in HIV prevention, I think. Whereas back then we were dealing with an awful lot of death and dying, a lot of education and follow-up around these heavy duty regimens, and it's just shifted into a different paradigm now. It's just a different stage for handling all the consequences of HIV disease, which, as Johnathan pointed out, is still serious. It's just in kind of a different way.
So I can remember back in the night, like as you're talking about the kind of cocktails that people had to take, that sometimes people would make a choice, perhaps even to not take the medications because the way they felt taking the medications and all the side effects that came with them was more toxic, and they felt worse than they were willing to kind of trade off the risk of what HIV might do to them for a while, rather than take those medications. Now, are the medications easier to tolerate? Are they less toxic? And how many medications, because you keep up with this stuff, I'm always amazed at how you do that, but how many medications are on the market these days to treat HIV?
Oh my goodness. Well, I want to say that that's a really good point, because I didn't mention that. Not only was it so much more in quantity of pills, but the side effects, the drugs were not as refined, and they caused an awful lot of really horrible side effects that, like you said, people sometimes it was almost like oncology or cancer treatment. So now they've refined so many of them to be much safer. Not only are there less of them, but the side effect profiles are much, much better. People get on them and you wouldn't even know. There's very subtle changes for most people when they take some of these newer integrates, and there's a variety of classes, but I'd have to count up, to be totally honest. I don't know what the running tab is on the number of new meds now, or on the total of medications for HIV now. But what I can tell you is they've expanded into more drug classes. So there's more ways to fight the virus. And now recently, they've even come up with an injectable treatment that is monthly, which I wouldn't say, oh, that's not a big deal, because I think that's for some people and not for others. But instead of taking a pill or pills every day, a lot of people are on just one pill once a day if it's just for their HIV. But this would, if say that was the only thing they were taking, they now have the option, if they don't have drug resistance and other things, that they need to be eligible for the injectable medication called Cabenuva, but they can now get treatment once a month. But they have to go to the doctor's. There's a lot of that could be a whole session in itself. But so the treatment has greatly evolved in many different ways. There's numerous ways to treat it. It's not just pills anymore. The side effect profiles are better. And of course, there's less pills in what's called simplified regimens.
And
So it's
I
come a long way.
Yeah, and I just think, we're talking about cocktails. We went down to a, for some people, only one pill. Now we're talking about one injection every month. It's possible. It's an option. So I think that that alone speaks about all the progress that has been not only in the research but on the treatment. And I did blow my hair my brain when I heard it. I was like, is this real? So and I even in the halls of Cook County, kind of like the phrase is closer to a cure, closer to a cure. So hopefully, maybe in a couple of years, we might be talking about a cure for HIV, which it's the goal, I guess, and close our doors because we already cured that.
Well, it's interesting to note too. I wanted to say that, when we talk about these simplified regimens, I don't want to be misleading and make it sound like it's just one of the medications. What they've done is they've combined a number of medications into one pill, or a number. It's just a little bit. It's just much more refined.
Yeah.
And so I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but it is interesting, and this is my point, that we went from AZT at the very beginning, lots of AZT, which was very toxic, which we learned later, to now, at this point in time, we're getting back to two really good medicines can sometimes control the virus. Like we have some oral therapies, and of course the Cabenuva. It's a combination of two drugs. So we're moving back again to making it more simple that way too. So it would be nice to see one medication do the trick and maybe be able to take it once every 6 months, and then ultimately to, have a therapeutic vaccine or a preventive vaccine. That would be wonderful.
That would be awesome.
We'll find
In
new
your
jobs here then.
in your crystal ball, Michelle, do you have or have you read anything that has any projection of a timeline for that kind of thing? Because I remember I sometimes tell people when I first started here, which was like a decade before you did, really then they were talking about like a vaccine for HIV. In a couple of years there would be a vaccine, in a couple of years they would be a vaccine. And my great career plan was, well, I'll do this for a couple of years and then it'll be over and I'll go do something else.
It's always a decade out with that vaccine stuff.
Okay, still.
It's a decade out. And now I don't know that it's quite a decade out now, because there's been, some scientific breakthroughs in a lot of other things. So sometimes it's a little contagious in the scientific realm, but I wish I had a crystal ball, but we are hearing stories of, I think that they're going to be doing some studies if they're able to on some of these people that are known as elite controllers, and two of which have been known to clear seemingly have had their HIV disappear from their cells. So, I can't totally predict, as no one can, but I have hopes for a scientific breakthrough to maybe eradicate this in our lifetime. That would be wonderful.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
and I would love to touch base on at least one of those cases, but before we go there, you've always been very good at staying abreast of the latest HIV medication developments and all this. So, and there is a lot to know. I've actually seen the list of the medications, and the pills available and all that. It's lengthy. It's not like, oh, there's 5 pills. No, it's lengthy. But we're not gonna go into the nitty gritty details, but it's not as easy as just say, okay, you have HIV, you're gonna take this pill and that's it. It's not as easy. That's why one of the services that are provided and that you actually provide here at Cook County is medication education and adherence. Could you talk a little bit about that and why is it important?
Well, with these medications, if you don't take them the way they're prescribed and you don't take them consistently, it can lead to what's called drug resistance.
Mhm.
And therefore, the virus can start to replicate and get out of control, and your medicines no longer work. And so it's very important that there's strict adherence and the ability to be adherent is to be able to take the medicine and not have horrible side effects and to understand them and to kind of with education comes, they say, power. So you get that empowerment of managing your health when you know things about your medication regimen that makes it as easy as possible for you to stick with taking it consistently.
Mhm. Yeah.
So adherence, in my opinion, I mean, I'm a little biased because, that's part of my work and I love that part of my work, teaching people about their medicines. And yeah, I get a great deal of satisfaction in seeing people reclaim their lives and not have a reduced quality of life because they are able to find a medication regimen that works so well for them. And with not only does the doctor has to prescribe it, but then the patient has to take it. So if you can in any way help the patient incorporate that into their daily life, there's so many things like the shift that people work. Some of these meds you have to take with food. Some of them you don't. We're getting away from that now. Some of the newer medications don't have as many food requirements. There's drug to drug interactions. There's so many important things that you need to know so that you can take your medication the way it's supposed to be taken and maintain your quality of life at the same time.
And I would think, just listening to you talk about that, there's a couple things that come to my mind. One is that we all know anybody who, and I don't, fortunately, don't have to go to the doctor very often, but we all know that doctors don't have a lot of time usually to spend with a patient to go over things like that. So I can see, a doctor gives you a script, knowing some of the things that you were talking about, having the time to sit down with someone like yourself and talk about the medications and what the side effects might be and how to handle it if you get the side effects and how it fits into your life and things like that. So that's like one piece of it. And then the other thing that it takes me back to what you said earlier, because I heard you say when you talked about this monthly injectable, that it might not be for everybody and that some people might have certain types of resistance, possibly because I'm inferring that that's possibly because maybe they weren't able to take their medications consistently and accurately the way they were supposed to. And so then the virus became resistant to that treatment. And then when newer options come out that might be more desirable, you might find yourself in a position that you can't take advantage of those newer options because of any kind of resistance or something. Am I putting that all together the right way?
Yes, that's absolutely correct because some of the newer medicines might have a new drug, but then it might be co-formulated with some of the older drugs, which a patient might have resistance to in the past, and that would, in most cases, eliminate that drug from the provider's options when they prescribe. So the other thing is that, we didn't mention were some of the other considerations, especially for the injectable, is it's not for everybody because some people would not want to have an injection. Maybe they have an IV drug history and it would threaten their sobriety. That's just one example. But a provider once told me the best regimen for the patient is the one that they can take.
How about that?
So you could get the best, the cream of the crop regimen, the benchmark medication, but if you can't take it, it's not going to, or you can't take it consistently, it could do more harm than good. So I think not only is adherence so important after the person gets the script and is ready to start, but it's so important in evaluating also patient readiness, because if they're not committed to taking this, like there's a lot of talk right now about early initiation of heart, like a rapid start, like on the day of diagnosis. Some of the drug companies are supplying a trial pack of their medications so that till they get insurance benefits or get their insurance going. But in my opinion, if it's at all possible, I think that those same patients should be evaluated for readiness, because we can know what's best sometimes for someone, but if they don't feel it's best for them at the time, once again, it's not going to do any good. So some of the old wisdom that we got back in the early days where adherence readiness was critical, I believe we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, you can carry some of that wisdom even into the ever-evolving, paradigm of HIV treatment.
Yeah. So good point.
So we are almost at the end, but we did mention that, for example, there was a person in Argentina who, in all accounts, was cured from HIV, and they're still trying to figure out why it happened, how it happened. Yeah, but it's very important to, although this is real, it's also very important to note that this is the second person to get cured without the intervention of bone marrow transplant, or other particular treatments. Granted, this is highly uncommon. Is not necessarily saying, we don't even have a percentage. It's literally just the second person to get cured without any particular treatment. So it make us think, and hope for a cure eventually. It's possible, but also should also put into consideration that part of eradicating HIV is protecting each other and ourselves, using condoms every time people have engaged in sexual behaviors. For people that may be in high risk behaviors, maybe PrEP might be an option. Although,
wait a minute. Can't say maybe PrEP might be an option and not mention what. I know there's commercials about it, but we have to say what PrEP is.
Oh, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, is a medication that a person can use to prevent the infection of HIV. Now, I say maybe because, as Michelle said a while ago, if a person doesn't have to take medications, then the better. Using a condom doesn't alter, doesn't affect in any part of the body. There's no long or short terms effect of using condoms, and it's available. We're not here saying don't use PrEP. Absolutely, if a person feels that they should, then they should. But it's very important to know PrEP. It's only to prevent HIV. And today, the day before World AIDS Day, we're talking about it. But we haven't touched upon other sexually transmitted infections, which we should also be thinking about. So PrEP, just like the birth control pill, which only prevents pregnancies, PrEP it's only about HIV. So people will still need to use condoms unless they are in a monogamous exclusive relationship, and they are keeping the communication very open.
And it sounds to me, as I'm listening to you say that, it sounds to me like the information Michelle shared earlier about readiness and medication adherence and being able to commit to taking something in a way it's prescribed and with some consistency so that it works the way that it's supposed to would probably also be really important around PrEP.
Exactly.
Well.
It's a medication. Well, and it has to be taken daily. For certain folks, it start being effective after 7 days. For others, after 28 days. So it's a whole process. That's why the education aspect is so important. Let's get educated. So folks, we're at the end. Any parting words? Anything that you would like to share, Michelle, Nadine?
Michelle, if somebody, and you might have something, so I didn't really want to totally jump on you, but in whatever you're sharing, could you also share if anybody's out there living with HIV? I know I always used to say to folks, there's no reason that anybody in this community should go without care if they want to be in care and they're HIV positive. So could you say a little something about how people can access services?
Sure. We try to make it as easy as possible, and all you have to do, if you're HIV positive and you would like some added support, you can just give us a call here. And Johnathan has kindly, or Nadine, one of you, have listed the contact information there. So that's all you got to do is call that number, and our receptionist will get you to the right place, and we'll try to give you as much support as we can to get you back to a healthier state of living.
Yeah. And if a person also wants to know their status, not only about HIV,
Right.
but other STIs, they can also call that number and set up an appointment for our STD clinic. And, getting yourself tested is part of the responsibility that we take not only for ourselves, but for others and also our sexual partners, because that's how we not only keep ourselves healthy, but keep others healthy too. I also wanted to mention that tomorrow, Wednesday, 1st of December, again, World AIDS Day, Cole County Wellness Services joined the LGBT Center to have a vigil for uh, on team or on topic of the World AIDS Day, and we are going to gather at the Calvary United Church of Christ on 640 Center Avenue here at Reading. Over there, we're gonna be. They are gonna display two quilts. I will encourage people to search for information about the HIV quilt. So we're gonna have two panels, really big panels, 12 by 12. That one will be the Rainbow Home, who and another one from Keith Haring, which was a very famous artist from here, Reading, who died from AIDS-related illnesses. So yeah, we encourage everyone to attend if you can, and remember, know your status, keep yourself safe, and if you are HIV positive or not, let's get down that stigma, and
Mhm.
let's very importantly, let's get educated, because we don't have to. The virus is here, but we don't. On top of that, we don't have to live with the stigma, and we don't have to prolong the stigma. So,
Yes.
Michelle, thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for
absolutely.
having me.
And hopefully we will see each other in the hallways, because we work in the same building. Take care, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.